You're standing in a kitchen the size of a closet, staring at 3 cabinets that already refuse to close. You've got a lifetime of things and nowhere to put them. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you know your grandmother lived in less space than this and never once complained about clutter. Here's what I found out, and it stopped me cold. The people who raised us stored more in a 4-room house than we managed to fit in a place twice the size, and they did it with almost no money and no plastic bins from the store. That skill didn't vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because someone realized there was more money in selling us storage than in teaching us how to store. By the end of this, I'm going to hand you a trick I traced back to a 1943 government pamphlet, printed during the war, that told American families exactly how to fit a full pantry into a space you'd swear was too small. It costs you nothing. It works in the home you already have, on the budget you already live on, whether you rent one room or own a little house free and clear. I remember the smell of my grandmother's back hall in Ohio, cool and dry, with rows of jars catching the light from one small window. I was maybe 7. I asked her how she fit everything, and she just smiled and tapped the wall. I didn't understand what she meant for almost 50 years. Now I do, and I can't stop thinking about how much money I wasted before I figured it out. So let me start where I went wrong. For most of my adult life, I did it the modern way. Every time I ran out of room, I bought a solution. A closet organizer here, a set of stacking bins there, one of those over-the-door racks that promised to change my life and instead just fell on my head twice a week. I spent, and I'm not exaggerating, well over $1,000 across the years on containers to hold things I probably should have thrown out. And my house never got less crowded. That was the part that finally woke me up. I kept buying storage, and I kept running out of storage, and it never once occurred to me that the whole system was designed that way. Think about it. There is an entire industry built on selling you the feeling of getting organized without ever letting you arrive. The container store, the closet consultant, the subscription boxes, the self-storage unit down the road with the bright orange doors. Do you know that the self-storage business in this country now takes in more than $39 billion a year? $39 billion. And the average person renting one of those units keeps it for well over a year, paying month after month to store things they mostly never touch again. Our grandparents would have found that insane. Paying rent every month on a room across town just to hold the things that won't fit in the room you already pay for. They didn't do that. They couldn't afford to do that. So they learned to make one small space do the work of 3, and that knowledge was so ordinary to them that nobody thought to write most of it down. But some of it was written down, and that's where this gets good. The first trick I want to give you is the one my grandmother tapped on the wall about, and it took me half a century to understand her. She was using the walls as storage, not with expensive shelving, with the space between the studs. In an old house, and in most houses still today, the walls are hollow. There are vertical wooden beams called studs, usually set about 16 inches apart, and between them is empty air, about 3.5 inches deep, doing absolutely nothing. During the Depression and through the war years, people cut small recessed shelves right into that dead space. A shallow cabinet set into the wall, between 2 studs, flush with the surface, holding spices, medicine bottles, sewing supplies, canned goods. It stuck out not 1 single inch into the room. My grandmother had one behind a little wooden door in her hall, and as a boy I thought it was a secret passage. It was just the wall, opened up and put to work. Now I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. I'm not cutting a hole in my wall. Fair enough. But here's the thing that made me feel foolish for waiting so long. You don't have to cut anything to use the same principle. A narrow shelf, 4 inches deep, mounted on the wall surface between where those studs are, gives you a spice rack, a medicine shelf, a place for reading glasses and keys, and it steals no floor space at all. The old-timers understood a truth we forgot. Floor space is precious and rare. Wall space is enormous and almost entirely wasted. Go stand in your smallest room right now and look up at the wall above eye level. In most homes, everything above about 5 feet is empty. That is a second room you already own and never use. Our grandparents lived in that upper space. We abandoned it, and then we went out and rented a storage unit. That alone changed how I saw my whole home, but it opened up a bigger question that nagged at me for weeks. If they were so good at using space, why did nobody teach us? Why did this knowledge just quietly disappear in a single generation? The answer is the part that made me angry, and I think it's going to do the same to you. Somewhere in the years after the war, our whole idea of the home changed, and it didn't change by accident. Before the 1950s, a house was something you filled with things you made, kept, and reused. Storage was built in, because things were meant to last and be stored, but a booming economy doesn't run on lasting and reusing, it runs on buying and replacing. So the message shifted, slowly, and then all at once. Buy new instead of keeping. When it's full, buy a bigger house. When the bigger house is full, buy storage. When the storage is full, rent a unit. At every single step, the answer to not having enough room was to spend more money. Never once was the answer to simply use the room you had more wisely, because there is no profit in teaching a person to need less. I read something that stuck with me. Between the 1950s and today, the size of the average new American home more than doubled, while the number of people living in each one actually went down. We got twice the house for fewer people, and we are still, somehow, out of room. That's not a space problem, that's a skill problem. We lost the skill, and we were sold storage to cover for it. Our grandparents had the skill, and the beautiful part is, skill doesn't cost anything, it just has to be remembered. So let me give you more of it, because once I started pulling this thread, it kept coming. Here's one that felt like magic the first time I tried it. The back of every door in your home is a flat, vertical surface that holds nothing. My grandmother hung a cloth organizer with pockets on the back of every door in her house, and I always thought it was just for shoes. It wasn't. Behind the pantry door she kept foil, wax paper, and small tools. Behind the bedroom door, gloves, scarves, small linens. Behind the bathroom door, every bottle and jar that would otherwise crowd a shelf. A single door, front and back, is around 20 square feet of storage surface, standing in your home right now, doing nothing but swinging open and shut. Count your doors. Closet doors, cabinet doors, the door under the sink, the door to the pantry. In a small home, you might have a dozen. That's the equivalent of a whole extra closet's worth of vertical surface, and you already paid for every inch of it. But here is where it gets clever, the way the old folks were clever. They didn't just hang things on the door. They matched the storage to the room by weight and by reach. Heavy things low, light things high, and the things you use every single day at the exact height of your own hand when it hangs at your side. That last part matters more as we get older, and I'll come back to it, because reaching and bending are how a lot of us get hurt at home, and the old methods protected against that without anyone calling it safety. Now let me tell you about the jars, because the jars are the heart of it. Before there were plastic containers in every size, before there were pantry bins with little chalkboard labels, there were glass jars, and our grandparents ran an entire household on them, not just for canning food, though they did plenty of that. They stored dry goods in glass, and they did it for reasons we completely forgot. Here's the first reason, and this is where a little science backs up the old way. When you keep flour, rice, beans, sugar, oats, pasta in clear glass jars, you can see exactly what you have and exactly how much is left. That sounds small. It isn't. Studies on household waste have found that the average family throws away something like a third of the food it buys, and a huge part of that is simply forgetting what's already in the back of a dark cabinet. You buy a second bag of rice because you can't see the first one. Glass jars end that. You see everything at a glance, and you stop buying what you already own. The second reason is that sealed glass keeps bugs out and freshness in far better than a folded paper bag with the top rolled down. My grandmother's flour never got weevils. Mine used to, back when I left it in the sack. A sealed jar is airtight in a way a box or bag never is. And the third reason is the one that mattered most for a small space. Jars stack, and they stack square. A row of matching jars on a shelf uses every inch of vertical room, sits flat and steady, and turns a messy cabinet of half-open bags into a neat wall of food you can actually count. You don't need fancy jars. Save your pasta sauce jars, your pickle jars, your mayonnaise jars. Wash them, let them dry all the way, and you have a free storage system that our grandparents would recognize instantly. I started doing this 2 years ago with jars I'd have thrown in the recycling, and my kitchen holds nearly double what it did, and I can find every single thing. It cost me nothing but the trouble of washing out some jars. Now, I promised you this works even if money is tight. Even if you're living alone in a small place, and you're watching this thinking that all these tricks still sound like they need a trip to the store. So let me speak straight to you for a minute, because I put this next part in this video with you in mind. That skill didn't vanish by accident, and if you want to go even deeper into recovering it, I want to tell you about something that might help. I put together a series of digital books, Smart Starts, Deeper Frugal, and The Full System, where I've gathered this kind of recovered wisdom into one place, organized so you can go at your own pace and apply it to your actual home and your actual life. If this way of thinking speaks to you, you'll find the link in the description below. Now, with that in mind, let's keep pulling the thread, because once I started looking, it kept coming. You do not need to buy one single thing to start. Everything I've told you so far uses what's already in your house. The empty walls, you already own. The backs of the doors, you already own. The jars are the containers your food already came in, and they're free. And this next method might be the most powerful of all, and it costs nothing but a quiet afternoon and a little honesty with yourself. It's the oldest storage trick there is, and it isn't a container. It's a rule. Our grandparents didn't keep things they didn't use because they physically could not afford the room. Scarcity made them ruthless in a way abundance made us soft. They had a rule that if a thing hadn't earned its keep in a year, it was passed to someone who needed it, sold, or let go. Here's how to do it without the pain, because I know letting go is hard, and I know some of these things carry memories. Take one box, just one, an ordinary cardboard box. Walk through one room, and into that box put only the things you are genuinely unsure about. Not the treasures, not the photos, just the maybes. Then write today's date on the box, tape it shut, and put it in a closet or under the bed. If a year goes by and you never once opened that box to get something out, you have your answer. You didn't need any of it. You can pass it on with a clear heart because you proved to yourself you never reached for it. This one trick, done through a small home, can free up more room than any shelf or bin you could ever buy. And it's exactly what our grandparents did, only they did it without needing permission or a system. They just knew that a small space stays livable only when everything in it earns its place. There's a name for the peace that comes from that, and I think we lost the word along with the skill. My grandmother would have just called it keeping house, making a small space feel calm and open instead of crammed and heavy. That feeling is worth more than square footage, and you can have it this weekend, for free, with a box and a marker. But I said I'd protect your body too, and this is where the old methods get quietly brilliant, because they were designed by people who worked hard into old age and could not afford an injury. Think about how many falls and strains happen at home from reaching up high or bending down low. The numbers here are serious. Falls are the leading cause of injury for older adults in this country, and a great many of them happen in the home, doing something as ordinary as reaching for a pot on a top shelf or a can on the floor of a pantry. Our grandparents arranged their storage so they almost never had to do either. Here was their rule, and it's so simple you'll wonder why nobody says it anymore. The things you use every day live between your knees and your eyes. That whole zone, from about the height of your knuckles when your arm hangs down, up to about eye level, is the safe zone. The reach you can do 100 times a day without strain and without stretching off balance. The heavy things, the everyday plates, the pots, the food you cook with most, all of it belongs in that band. Up high, above your head, goes only the light and the rare, the holiday dishes, the thing you use twice a year. If it's up high and it's heavy, you're one reach away from a fall, and our grandparents knew that in their bones because they'd seen it happen to their own parents. Down low, near the floor, goes the light and rarely used as well, or the heavy things you can slide rather than lift. The trick they used for low storage was to put everything heavy on something that pulls out toward you, so you never bend and reach into a dark space blind. A simple pull-out, even just a shallow tray or a lazy turntable, means the storage comes to you instead of you crawling into it. I set my own kitchen up this way after my sister took a bad fall reaching for a mixing bowl she kept on top of the refrigerator. Everything heavy and everyday now lives at the height of my own hands. I haven't stretched or teetered for a pot in 2 years. That's not just tidy, that's staying independent, staying in your own home longer, and that was the quiet genius behind the old way. It kept people safe without ever calling itself safety. So now you've got the walls, the doors, the jars, the one-box rule, and the safe reaching zone. But I've been holding the best one back, the one I traced all the way to that wartime pamphlet, and it's time I gave it to you, because this is the one that ties it all together. During the Second World War, the government needed families to grow and store their own food, because so much of what the country produced was being sent to feed soldiers overseas. Millions of Americans planted what were called victory gardens, and suddenly ordinary families in small city homes and tiny apartments had to store a whole season's worth of food with no root cellar, no barn, no space at all. So in 1943, the government and the home economists of the day put out guidance for exactly this problem: how a family with almost no room could store months of food safely. And buried in that old wartime thinking is a principle so clever I actually said it out loud when I understood it. They called it storing by season and by rotation, and here's how it worked. You don't store everything you own in the prime, easy-to-reach space all at once. You keep only the current season's things in the good space, right at hand. Everything for the other seasons gets stored deep, up high, or in the hardest-to-reach spots, because you won't need it for months. Then, 4 times a year, when the season turns, you rotate. The winter things come down and the summer things go up. The heavy coats trade places with the light ones. Do you see what that does? It means your best, easiest storage space, the prime real estate at eye level and arm's reach, is never wasted on things you won't touch for 6 months. In a small home, this is everything. Most of us store all 4 seasons crammed together, so 3/4 of our best space is holding things we can't use right now. The wartime method says only today's season gets the good spot. Everything else waits its turn in the deep storage up high and down low. But the true secret, the part that made me sit back in my chair, was how they handled the rotation itself. And this is the piece almost nobody knows anymore. They stored food and goods first in, first out, like a little assembly line. When you brought new supplies in, you put them at the back, and you pulled from the front. So the oldest thing was always the next thing you used, and nothing ever got buried and forgotten and spoiled in the back. That old pamphlet described building simple slanted shelves where a can placed in the back would roll gently down to the front as you took one away, so the next oldest was always waiting right there at your hand. You can do the tiniest version of this in your own pantry this weekend with nothing but a little attention. When you come home from the store, don't shove the new cans in front. Pull the old ones forward and put the new ones behind. That one habit means you will never again find a swollen, expired can hiding in the back, and you will never again waste money buying what you already had but couldn't see. It's the same principle every grocery store uses on you, quietly, every day. They put the oldest milk in front so it sells first. Our grandparents ran their own homes with that same wisdom, and then we forgot it and started throwing away 1/3 of our food. Think about what that pamphlet really was. It was the government, in a time of true scarcity, teaching ordinary people the storage skills that let a family thrive in a small space with very little. And the moment the scarcity ended and the money started flowing, that knowledge was allowed to fade, because a nation that needs less is not as good for business as a nation that always needs more. One generation kept it alive, my grandmother's generation. They lived it because they had to, and they carried it quietly into homes like the little house in Ohio, with the shelves cut into the wall. They didn't lecture about it, they just did it, and most of us were too young or too busy to ask them how, and then they were gone, and the knowledge nearly went with them. But it didn't go, because a few of us went digging, and now you have it too. The walls that are secretly a second room, the doors that are a hidden closet, the free glass jars that hold twice as much and waste nothing, the one box that tells you the truth about what you actually need, the safe zone between your knees and your eyes that keeps you on your feet and in your own home, and the wartime rotation that keeps your best space for what you use now and never lets food die forgotten in the dark. None of it costs money. All of it costs a little attention and the willingness to believe that the people who came before us knew something worth keeping. Here's what I really want you to walk away feeling. You did not run out of space. You were talked out of the skill that made space, so that you'd keep paying, month after month, to store the overflow. And you just took that skill back. If you're the kind of person who has always suspected that the simplest answers were quietly buried because the complicated ones made somebody rich, then you and I understand each other, and this is the right place for you to be. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this. Tell me about the storage trick your own mother or grandmother used, the one you'd half forgotten until right now. Was it the jars on the shelf, the organizer on the back of the door, or something I've never even heard of? Leave it in the comments below, because someone reading this needs exactly what your family knew, and you might be the only one left who remembers it. And if you want more of this, the real, recovered wisdom that the modern world stopped teaching on purpose, come along with the rest of us who are digging it back up. Next time, I'm going to show you the forgotten way our grandparents kept food cold and fresh for a week, with no refrigerator at all, using nothing but a clay pot, some water, and a trick that's thousands of years old and works better than you'd ever believe. You won't want to miss where that one comes from. Stay with me, and let's keep bringing it all back home. Before you go, let me say one thing. Inside the Wise Living Circle, I walk you through all 27 tricks, room by room, picking up right where we stopped. You can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone, folks, just like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime.